Honourable members, I therefore call on Members' Order of the Day number 2.
Joint Family Homes Repeal Bill, first reading.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Simon O'Connor.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Joint Family Homes Repeal Bill be now read a first time, and I nominate the Justice and Electoral Select Committee to consider the bill. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this bill is very simple, but the principles underlying the introduction of this bill are incredibly important. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this bill is to repeal the Joint Family Homes Act of 1964. And particularly for the people in the Green Party, I want to acknowledge this is not repealing having joints in the family home. But, Mr. Speaker, this is also a bill that's a statement about the laws of New Zealand, that they need to be tidy, simple, current and up to date, and also about reducing tautological redundancy, if you allow me a little bit of etymological humour. Thank you, I just really enjoyed that. Anyway, now that the Labour Party's gone on holiday, before, Mr. Speaker, I turn to the particulars of this bill, I do want to reflect on the context in which it was introduced. Mr. Speaker, it's almost 8 months to the day, in fact 8 months tomorrow, that I was elected to Parliament, to the great seat, in fact the best seat of Parliament in Tamaki. And they are absolutely thrilled that their new Member of Parliament is having the opportunity to take a piece of legislation, a member's piece of legislation, through the House. And it's a real great privilege to be able to guide and to learn the process. And, Mr. Speaker, that doesn't take away from the importance of the bill. But what it is an opportunity to be a legislator. I suppose it's a good reminder to us all in the House that our first core purpose is to be legislators. And so absolutely thrilled, and thrilled too that my constituents are happy with that, and I've been having a lot of good engagement with them and lawyers and that around Auckland in particular. So, Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to be here, to have a bill in my name so early in the piece. I want to then turn to thank my colleagues who have given me great support in preparing for this, the clerk and others in Parliament who have assisted. Again, this is a new experience. And also to those in the community. As I said, I was struck from the moment it was pulled out of the ballot in the Tables office, how many people, be it media, lawyers and others, who are on the phone to ask questions around this. And that's always an excellent way to polish up your knowledge and reading on the area. But, Mr. Speaker, I noted that the primary purpose of the bill is to repeal the Joint Family Home Act of 1964, but I also noted that there's a wider philosophy within this, and that's to make legislation that's accessible, legislation that's clear, concise, up-to-date, non-repetitive and current. And, Mr. Speaker, this is emblematic of National's philosophy. It's a commitment to legal clarity, to reducing red tape and to eliminating unnecessary legislation. And, Mr. Speaker, it's a benign little bill in this House, and I'm looking forward to the unanimous support of the House. Indeed. Because, who wants to stand up here, Mr. Speaker, and say we don't need, or we need rather, more legislation and more red tape? This really is a simple bill to get those easy things done and for all of us to make this country a little bit better. So, Mr. Speaker, I do want now to turn to the legislation itself and to talk a little bit about the background which provides the context around the whole repeal bill. This was a bill put through in 1964 to protect the family home. Anecdotally, what it was there for is if the wife or the husband went bankrupt, that the house itself could not be lost. It was to be registered in the joint name of the married couple. And importantly, it's there to secure the family home from unsecured creditors. And I think that's one distinction that I've needed to put out to the public when talking with them over recent weeks and months. It was a situation, again, where bankruptcy was the primary concern, that if the husband or the wife went bankrupt, that there was an opportunity to protect the family home. But another important aspect or an area of the bill that was put through and not often discussed is that it only protected the equity of the house, or up to $103,000. And I know there's often a lot of talk in the House around rising house prices and so forth. So this bill again is shown, or rather the bill that this is seeking to repeal, is shown in the context of really bringing things up to date. Importantly too, Mr. Speaker, this is a bill which looks to, I should return actually to the initial bill of 64, not that I was around at the time, of course. It's the time that this bill came through, there were death duties and stamp duties and gift duties. And we find now, Mr. Speaker, that there's, well, no need for it. The Law Commission realised this in 2001, put out a fairly substantial report, and I'm quite sure all members of the House have pored over that quite, well, word for word. But it was in 2001 that the Law Commission recommended this change, and my colleague, the now Honourable Joe Goodhue, sponsored the bill, but on taking a Crown warrant, had to hand it over. And I took a bit of time to consider whether to put my name to this, and as I was saying to someone the other day, I don't do so lightly. All legislation is important, and I think actually it's a really good example. It's a really good example of the efficacy of being in the table room when the ballot's been drawn. The first time I put my name to a bill, the first time I went to the table office, the bill got drawn out. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to my second and third members' bill. I was not so much lucky on that one, Mr. Mallard. But, Mr. Speaker, the Law Commission has said that this Act is no longer needed. It's a chance to repeal it. And what we've seen is that new legislation over the years has replaced the need for this Joint Family Homes Act. We obviously have the Relationship Properties Act, which splits assets automatically. We have family trusts, and with the added value of late, that gift duty is no longer required. We also note that the previous bill, as I said, limited the amount that could be held to unsecured creditors. As I said, death duties have gone, stamp duties have gone. This is now a redundant piece of legislation. And finally, turning to the practical elements, when this bill first started, Mr. Speaker, we had over 30,000 people who used this, but back in 2001 it was just over 1,000, and of course that's about 11 years ago, so its usage has dropped. So, Mr. Speaker, I do want to recommend this bill to the House, and in doing so I want to return to the first principles. Mr. Speaker, this member's bill sits on the principles of making law that is accessible, clear and up to date. It's about keeping our statute book up to date, and to that end this bill is very important. It's important too as it brings clarity to the issues of relationships and to property. And, Mr. Speaker, other laws are well in place to protect Kiwis in this matter, and I think that's one key message for those listening in. Mr. Speaker, the repeal of the Joint Family Homes Act is not going to revolutionise this country. It's not going to make society better in one bold stroke, but it's a small step in the right direction. And so, Mr. Speaker and colleagues in the House, I ask for your support as we move this in its first reading.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker,
I call the honourable member